So, well, I'm here in the Orangeburg Arts Center with Susan Livingston, a dear friend for many years,
Yes.
an artist whose work I was not as aware of how complex your work was and how you've evolved over time. So, Susan, tell us a little bit about this first piece. This is self-portrait.
This piece I began in 1980, which does kind of date me. I have been working in fiber for 45 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
I began just deciding I could do some paintable dye type things to go with my embroidery and stitching. My background started with the Embroiderers Guild of America, and so of course you learn a lot of things when you go to seminars. I learned a lot of different types of stitches. When I started this, I was also doing a lot of reading in an art history way.
Mm-hmm.
So the Cluny tapestries were part of it, and of course the unicorn behind the fence is a very famous one. Unicorns also signify new beginnings, and at the time I was working on this, I was also pregnant with my first child.
Oh.
So that new beginning was already in the works. I started doing the stitching that I wanted to do to get a feeling of texture.
Mm-hmm.
When I got to the one arm, I was not quite sure how to handle getting the stitching around that. So I just had it go over that. And then
I don't know if you can see, you have to zoom in, because there's an arm underneath the cowl, underneath the shawl.
Right.
It's this beautiful interlacing, it's almost woven and supposed to stitch.
Right.
It created that effect.
Right. And then it kind of came up that possibly maybe this was an indicator of something that was going to happen later, and my arm was positioned in that position because it was no longer a working arm. So sort of a precursor, I guess is the word I was looking for.
So, and that's kind of leading into another part of your biography. You had an accident, and which arm was damaged?
My right arm. It's heavily damaged, unfortunately. It's amazing what an airbag can do. It broke my arm in 2 places, which did a lot of nerve damage. So,
of course, it's the left arm that's covered here.
Yes, but it's a mirror image.
Right.
It's the correct.
So it's a self-portrait you're looking at. Yes, I see what you're. Okay.
So it would have been easier if it had been my left arm, but nothing in life should be too easy.
So you continue this incredible work after you had the accident, but this is like a premonition. You're saying,
right? Sort of.
Okay, but let's just look at this piece that's right by it. So this was a self-portrait. This piece is called Crystallizing Time, and the thing that's so exciting about it is all the different textures, the different materials, the different varieties, the use of mesh, the use of iridescent. Is that fiber? Is that paper?
Paper is the material on the right. This, however, is packing materials that are styrofoam for whatever reason also used to have snaky stuff in it. And you take it out of the box and it would be all coiled or knotted or whatever, and I just collected it and painted this. And this was during the time where I think I was doing a lot of stitching and a lot of different stitches. And I thought I should be able to actually put almost anything into a piece of work. This is actually a curled piece of sycamore bark.
So it's natural, well, you can see the natural graining of the bark, but you painted it gold.
Right.
So it's not gilded, but it's spray painted.
Right.
And you painted that similar motif with the packing material. So that unifies this. Is the packing material paper? What is it made of? Do you know?
I think it was styrofoam, like the peanuts are, only this was. And I didn't spray, I actually brush painted everything. because, you know, that takes
Healthier.
more time.
It's healthy.
And I mean, I could use it, the same paint on edging or something like that.
Yeah. So, and you decided to tear that edge, or did you find that piece of paper shaped
I
as it
think I
is?
tore that edge. I'm very big into torn edges, and I think I tore. I'm not quite sure how I got that same type of edge in that cellophane, because that's not very easy to tear.
Well, the cellophane is actually arranged
Mm-hmm.
irregularly. So the thing about the tearing is the tearing creates a fractal pattern, which I think is very exciting. I also really enjoy torn edges and irregularities.
Right.
For example, when you use, if you make a print, it's commonplace for the artist to tear the edges of the paper to create that irregular,
Cool.
organic edge in the paper. And then you have these little stitched elements throughout with metallic thread, and you've added beads. And what is this little device? It looks almost like a watch.
It is a watch.
It is a watch.
Somebody gave me this little watch face and said, and this is probably the very first piece I've done about time. But even back then, time is something that enters into my work off and on.
Well, let's point out that this show is called Retrospection, Introspection. If you do a retrospective for an artist, it's looking back in time at the things you've created. And if it's an introspection, it's looking within yourself about the emergence of your ideas. And with that in mind, let's shift over to the piece that you did after, well, you started before your accident and continue it afterwards. Let's go and take a look at that. But outside your box, or outside my box is the title. Started in 2002 and continued in 2008. When did your accident occur?
The accident was in 2004. So I painted all the fabrics, and this was when I was beginning to experiment with painting fabrics and adding interest before a needle and thread even came close to it. And somewhere I would think this was probably one of the first things that I did stitch.
Sort of concentric loop, this spiral. And you often use circles and spirals in your work.
I love circles. When I'm stitching circles, it's almost like meditating for me, because it is a forced round and round, the same as if you were just looking at something doing that. So,
question: do you start tight and spiral out, or do you start out and tighten in?
Actually, I used to start on the inside, but I have found that I like starting on the larger outside. And then it becomes easier to control getting into that smaller. I do often have some marking on the fabrics to follow, because I have this vision of it being a very symmetrical piece. So when I'm doing a lot of circles, there has to be some guidance, or who knows where I would end up.
And is this an embroidered flower here?
That is, and that is also, that's actually more of an eye.
Oh, it's an eye.
Because that's even the color of my eye is that hazel green brown.
Okay.
So, and to me at the same time, this was also another eye. So, I mean, we do have different visions at different times. So I think at that time I was kind of focusing on some of that.
And it's a wonderful shiny metallic thread cross stitch up here and interlaced down here. And where did you find the webbing? When people come to look at it.
That's a tool. I use a lot of tool like you would purchase for bridal veiling, but it also comes in black and different grays. I can sometimes find different weights and also the density. But I also use window screening because I can have specific shapes in that more because it doesn't move around the same as tulle does.
And you cut it, or how do you?
I used to cut it. I now find that if I want a free form shape, you can tear tulle and then I can place it. So I'm getting a more natural look. I found I can also cut some shapes with a X-Acto knife and control it since I'm not using the scissors. And so a X-Acto knife has become a very important tool.
What's also wonderful now, this pattern of squares that they're painted on.
Right. I used cut stencils and did it in different layers to get that dimension. I think the gold was the last layer.
Because I was wondering how you got them to be so evenly, the squares are so measured. So you have a stencil and you paint even. And it's the same for the red and the gold.
So you just kind of layer it from the bottom up.
Well, you're saying, though, it's fascinating. You can't remember what parts you started before the accident.
Correct.
And what parts were after.
Right. This piece, when I just pulled it back out and I said, okay, you've got to start working. And I tried as well as I could to make it be similar because I wanted to see how much I could do. It was a while until I actually could thread a needle. And that part, once I got past that, it was like, okay, we can do this now.
But you had to learn to use your left hand.
Right. Well, I do stitch with my right hand now. I'm back to that. I can grip things a lot of times. Letting go of them is a whole different ballgame. So don't let me pick money up because it stays.
That might be a good thing.
It is. So it was a lesson in patience when I got back to doing it, and just being able to say, okay, this is not perfect, but it doesn't need to be.
So that introduces us to this idea of how you turn what was your creative work into therapeutic work.
Right.
And so from the stitching and working with fabrics, you extended or expanded into three-dimensional objects, which are behind this installation. So let's take a look at this, and you can tell us more about what you're trying to communicate and how all of these pieces work together. And I have to tell you, when I saw this, especially I saw Fractured, I wondered if you'd been looking at Frida Kahlo.
Frida Kahlo is one of my heroines. She was obviously had so much more to deal with, but I identified with her. Actually, there's been something about Frida I've always loved. So I think my inner Frida came out. I started this, I think it was at Art Fields in 2016. So I was in an antique mall with a friend and found these hands, which incidentally are surgical glove molds, which I thought was interesting considering how many surgeries I'd actually had about what this is showing us.
And also they're very small hands.
Some of them I picked out as many in the sizes that I could. Some of them are a little bigger, and there are some that are really large, but I wanted them to be more handleable, and I wanted them to be pretty much the same size. I had also been working at Barnes & Noble during this time, and my store on Harbison Boulevard was closing. And we were ripping up different parts of it.
We used to meet in the Barnes & Noble.
In the Barnes & Noble. So this conduit and the wires came from that store. It was indicating the nerves that were in my arm. one of my buddies up there helped me. Believe it or not, sometimes these things are not that easy to break. But he helped me break it and to manageable pieces so that this could be illustrated.
Now these are plaster. Is that right?
They're a ceramic, I believe. Yes,
that's right.
they're a ceramic.
They are ceramic. That's why they're so durable. That's why they're, okay.
They are.
Yeah.
And so these stands are from sign holders that were in Barnes and Noble.
Oh, okay.
And then my son made the part that was to hold this hand.
The sort of surgery tray.
Right, right.
Well, if people don't know who Frida Kahlo is, do you want to talk about her? She was
a Mexican artist. She was not well known when she met Diego Rivera. I'm happy to say I think her name is a stronger presence in the art world now.
Yeah, I agree.
And she was in a major accident in a bus when she was like 16.
She was a teenager.
And thrown around, and a rail that was part of the bus.
Well, the pole in the center of the bus.
Yeah, that you would hold on to, impaled her through a good part of her torso. So she always had pain for the rest of her life because there wasn't that much they could do then. Right. And she died when she was about 37. Yeah. So, but she learned to paint lying in bed some of the time. So, you know, we can do great things no matter what.
Well, the thing is, her paintings are autobiographical.
Right.
And they often dealt with the pain she was experiencing, and they often dealt with themes around her surgeries and her suffering.
Right.
And so for you to take your experience in the accident and transform it into something we can see, and that this sort of broken, well, the safety, it's not safety glass. What are these little particles?
Actually, those are things that you can buy to do, put in vases and things.
Oh, to make the
so they shouldn't really be too sharp, but I had a couple different things like that I worked with. Because in each hand, there's still, this one was called Past Perfect. And so it was glittery, new, perfect. But there's still perfect parts of every hand. And so
some with braces, some of the braces detached.
This is the real brace.
That's the actual brace.
This is the brace I used to wear a lot. My occupational therapist, Mitzi Williams, she would make the brace, but I decided they were boring. So I guess that was my first art after the accident, was to be able to do this and put this on. We did just try this out a little while ago. I wasn't sure I could still get it on. And I had hooks glued onto my fingernails and then rubber bands that came up and over. And so that piece is very much like what I had. And that was to help
these bands. Right.
Try and exercise to try and pull down and push up.
To educate the nerves and muscles.
Right, to try and re-educate them. It was a good try. It didn't really work too well, but...
that is the most exciting brace I think I've ever seen in my life.
I know. Mitzi had these for a while in therapy because, you know, it shows a general attitude that I think she liked to celebrate the fact that she knew I was an artist and she knew that this was a difficult thing to have to work with. And so...
I'm also noticing, Susan, sorry to interrupt you, but each one is an individual work. They're here together as an installation.
Right.
But each has its own identity.
Right.
Like a phase in your development. So what were you saying there? Susan, not Susan, your therapist, what was her name? Mitzi. What was she saying about creating these works so that it would be more exciting for you? And I picked this one up.
Yes, that was my last brace. That was just sort of a maintenance thing.
With ladybugs.
which stand for something, and I don't remember what.
Ladybugs are industrious. They are symbols of good luck.
Yep.
And these are really beautiful. Did you make those?
Those are beads, I believe, because I think they have a hole in them, and somehow I stitched those on. So.
But you sewed all of this?
I painted things, and there were some things I stitched onto fabric, but some things I also just glued.
That is gorgeous.
I mean, it was making these was learning how to rethread and do some things like that.
Now, did this one have a title? Is that Resilient?
No, this is just a backup addition to Resilient is this one, and it has, it has, these are actual chords from the music department and different things, but I definitely think I became a lot more resilient because there had to be a lot more give and take, and I could not expect that things would ever be exactly the same. And in a lot of ways, that is good.
So you had to go through a process of discovering what new accomplishments you might have with what had happened.
Right.
And tell us just a little bit about this before we move on. It's the brass, the tacks, the nails.
That's my favorite one. That is titled Tenacity. And to me, tenacity is the positive word for stubborn.
Yes.
I am very tenacious. I will figure out how I'm going to make something work. It may not be easy. It may not happen the first time or the second time, but by the fourth time, very probably. And so I had 11 hands all told. And for the 12th hand, my son and I made a cast of the hand, which he got a little worried at one point because I'm pulling it out and it's hard to tell if you were going to be able to get the extra casting material. And it definitely shows the position, and pretty much the only position the hand would go in. And so
but that one is slightly smaller than your hand.
Well, it is my hand, though. I mean, this hand has atrophied a lot.
Now that you're close to it, I can see it is, yes, okay.
And it's called Realistic.
Ah, okay. The actual condition or the position of your fingers after the accident.
It's very realistic.
Outstanding. So this is inspirational, but I want to go to this last piece, which, what is it called? Walking Toward the Sunset?
Walking Toward the End of Day.
Walking Toward the End of Day. There's so many pieces in this show. Each one has its own story. Each one has its unique qualities. I like this one with the money included.
And you read that book, and nothing has changed.
Ah.
This was
global unit, yes. Okay. Right. Where do you go from here? The human condition. What is it
This
called?
was 1980s.
Where do we go from here?
And we still are asking that question.
We're still trying to figure out where. Well, we're in a process. We're always going somewhere. But that was the title of a painting by Gauguin, by Paul Gauguin as well.
I don't think
I think it's Who Are We? Where Are We Going? There's 3 questions. I can't remember it all.
Why?
Why are we going there? So I saw this piece. I was just completely struck, in part because of the use of the iridescent color, but the graded palette, these tertiary colors is this wool?
It is all wool. The background of this is knitted. And I decided I was doing a lot of knitting. This piece was completed in 2011, probably started at least in 2010 because it used to take me quite a while to do things. The knitting was good for my hands. The wool itself is good for your hands because a lot of wool has lanolin in it. But I also knew that I would probably be felting the piece when it was completed. So I pulled together all my yarns, and there's mohair in here. Which you can tell that's a good mohair. And there's some up here. There's some like a boucle that has a texture. A lot of different colors. In the sky, I blended different yarns together so I could get the gradation that I wanted. And I kind of did what I call the free-form knitting. I would deliberately drop stitches or add stitches somewhere else just change size of needles at times. So it took a while to knit this because it was probably about this wide when I cast off down here. I did start with the sky. And so I would decrease getting down to this part.
And I love that. I love the shape. It's almost like it's an inverse perspective.
It is.
Yeah.
And the important thing just kept getting wider, the sky.
The universe. And then down to the particularity of where you are. But it's a landscape. And the gradations of color, that was the thing that really struck me about this, is like, well, how did she really go about this process of figuring out how to go through these greens? And I'm assuming that's a river?
There's a pond there, so it's, it is a water feature.
This is a water feature.
This is the Columbia Road.
Oh, in Orange Road, Columbia Road, going out of town towards Columbia. And then these beautiful embroidered trees or shrubs. And what is that exactly? Yeah.
There's some resists in here. This is a resist. These are resists also that I did before the felting process. So it gives you, this is kind of all the shrubbery that's on the opposite side of the pond, and there was shrubbery here. And I actually went down and cut a few branches from something, so I had sticks from that shrub to stitch in here.
Oh, so the branch,
there are true.
The actual branches are stitched into the piece. Now, did you dye this
I did
yourself?
not dye any of the yarns. These are very nice commercially available yarns, and I just blended different things. And this was actually before I started dyeing.
Okay.
I do dye now.
This inspired you to dye.
There's a lot more stitching in the sunset that actually, than I think shows, although, there's a hidden glow kind of, but then at the very end, I added this 22 karat gold foil, which is what gives you that beautiful, when you stand way back, you still see this, and you kind of want to walk toward it.
The glimmers of sunshine through the clouds. That's what it gives you.
So I entered it into 2 different exhibitions, and it was not accepted in either one. So my son-in-law had it hanging in his office in D.C. for a while, and then we put it in a box, and it was in my studio for the last 8 years. And I had actually forgotten what it looked like. And I opened the box about a month ago and started to pull it out, and my eyes got kind of wide, and I said, wow, why? Back then it really was hard when you were turned down for an exhibition. Now I'm used to it. And so, but that really, I guess I just felt like if it was not going to be accepted, then maybe. But when I pulled it out, I knew that this was a piece that should not have been in a box for 8 years. So
the problem with the exhibitions is it depends on who's the judge,
right, or
the council, the group, and their tastes. And did you send in photographs, or did you send?
Yes, I think it was photographs or slides, which I've never been very good at. So
that's a deferred experience. They don't see the incredible textures of this piece and the richness that's there, and it's a very sensual piece. It's something people need to come and look at.
And it is framed without glass, but it needs to be, because glass would be a barrier between the texture and everything else. And I
might flatten it.
I think, it's deep enough, but still, I think you wouldn't see nearly what is there. So.
And I'm seeing more, the twigs.
There's lots of stitching.
Woven into,
yes.
It's brilliant.
I finally had to tell myself it was complete. Stop stitching, put everything away. It is finished. I mean, that used to be a very difficult thing for me.
Well, Susan, this has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for walking around with me.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. I was so excited when I heard you'd come to see it. I really was.
So encourage everyone to come to the Orangeburg Arts Center. The show's up how long?
Till the end of May. And the Orangeburg Arts Center is open Monday through Friday from 10 to 4.
Monday through Friday, 10 to 4. Thank you.
Thank you.